What up, Cavs Nation? I'm your host, Ethan Sands, and I'm back with another episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. It's been a long week for the Cleveland Cavaliers. It's been a long week for your favorite beat writers and podcast hosts. So, to round out the week, to head into the weekend with not only some good vibes with the OSU game tonight, but also an understanding that we have a job to do for you all. It's another episode of the Hey Chris podcast with me, as you might have heard, Chris Fedor of cleveland.com, of course. And Chris, I know we talk a lot about hoops on this team, and we're going to get into that. But when it comes to the national championship, when it comes to Cleveland Cavaliers, when it comes to Ohio and Cleveland love, is this the best that it's been in a while for overall hype around multiple teams around the state?
I don't think so. I mean, I think when the Cavs won the championship, that kind of trumped everything. And at that time, when the Cavs, it's interesting because when the Cavs were going to the finals 4 straight years, the Browns were like really, really bad, but they had one season that stood out as kind of like the season of dreams. And I think that also coincided with Ohio State either being in the national championship, winning the national championship, or being like one of the top teams in the country. So I don't know. That also coincided with like the Guardians, then the Indians, being in the World Series. So I think like more like this is a good time. There's no doubt about it. Sorry, Browns. With Ohio State playing for the national championship and the Cavs being, clearly one of the few teams in the NBA that can actually win an NBA championship, or at least that's my belief at this point. It is a good time, but during those 4 years of the Cavs going to the finals every single year, and that also coinciding with other success that some of the other sports teams in the town had, especially, the then Indians, that was a magical time in this city. That's for sure. I mean, you had LeBron James, Richard Jefferson, Channing Frye, like all those guys in a loge going nuts when Rajai Davis like yanked that home run down the left field line. And it felt like, the then Indians were going to win the World Series. It didn't happen that way. But that's what it felt like at that time. So there are a few times that I kind of remember this city being a little bit more electric, but this is aside from the Browns, this is a really good time to be a Cleveland sports fan. Or an Ohio sports fan, I should say.
Right. And that's the distinction that I was trying to figure out there, because it's not just Cleveland, obviously Columbus, Ohio, Ohio State, all those different things. But, I mean, I feel like a lot of the records that the Cavs are breaking, the connections, it dates back to like 2018 when the last time like a lot of this stuff was happening. So I definitely think it's been a couple years since it's been at this level, but it's good to get your perspective on that. But
I'm trying to think what that year was that the Browns just like they stopped sucking for a while or long enough for everybody to just like enjoy it. What year was that? I think it was Baker's rookie year, maybe? I don't remember. I'd have to look that up.
Yeah.
It's not important anyway. I just remember that there was one that was just kind of random there.
Anyway, let's move away from the overall
Certainly wasn't 2017.
It was not
that much. Although that was a very successful season in a different kind of way. Because it led to them, sucking so bad that they got the number 1 pick in the draft. Was it 15? Yeah. It certainly wasn't 15. Yeesh. 2020? 2020? Yeah, that 2020. That didn't coincide with the Cavs run. I don't know what I was talking about. All these sucky years for the Browns just blended together, and I just blacked out, apparently. 2020 was when they finally got to the playoffs. That did not coincide with the Cavs' success. So, yeah, I don't know what I was talking about in terms of the Browns there. Maybe I considered it a success because they sucked so bad that they got the first pick.
Maybe. I mean, accountability. Glad you hold yourself accountable for
Yeah, I
that,
know,
Chris.
right?
Pulling that stuff up real quick. But let's get into this Hey Chris episode. We got a couple of good questions, and we're gonna start with our guy James in Nebraska. He says Donovan has been DNP'd a couple of times now. Is he nursing an injury? Is basketball kind of like football, the whole team dealing with minor to middling injuries the whole season? Thanks. Being able to ask you guys questions is great. And I mean, Chris, I like to toot Chris's horn for him at some parts, but like the before the game even played, before like the injury report had come out, Chris on this podcast had said that Donovan Mitchell was likely going to be a rest candidate for the game against the Toronto Raptors, especially after playing 35 minutes against the OKC Thunder. Even though he didn't have the best game, he still was out there, and that takes a toll on your body. But Chris, can you talk a little bit more about what you've learned about the overall plan that Kenny Atkinson has referenced a couple of different times when it comes to resting players, especially Donovan Mitchell, in lieu of getting them prepared and as rested and healthy as possible heading into the playoffs?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody could see it last year. Donovan was just worn out. You know, he played a ton of minutes. He was one of the highest minute guys in the entire NBA. And look, part of that was the fact that Darius Garland missed 6 weeks in the season, and Evan Mobley missed 6 weeks as well. And those absences coincided with one another. And Donovan felt like he had to do a lot for the team to win games, to stay afloat, to keep their home court advantage. Um, and like there were times that the organization was like, "Hey, Donovan, like tone it back," and he would tell JB Bickerstaff, "Hey, look, I want to play the entire second half. Like we have a chance to win this thing." But by the time the playoffs rolled around, because he had to carry such a heavy burden and because he had so many point guard responsibilities, more than 60% of the time that he was on the floor, like it was a point guard possession for Donovan. And that takes a lot out of you when you have that level of responsibility on the offensive end of the floor. So by the time the playoffs rolled around, he was dragging his leg into the playoffs. And then he obviously had that calf issue. So he had a knee issue, he had a calf issue. He didn't even meet the threshold of games played last year to qualify for end of season awards because he was dealing with an achy knee. And I think the Cavs recognized coming into the season, they didn't get the best version of Donovan Mitchell in the playoffs because he wasn't 100%. And look, guys aren't going to be 100% going into the playoffs because it's a long 82 game grind. But you want him to be in the best physical and mental condition that he can be in so that the Cavs can really take a run at this thing. So given everything that happened last year, especially when it came to Donovan and his workload, the Cavs and Kenny Atkinson developed this big picture plan, and they said, we're going to try and get him through the 82 game regular season in a different kind of way than years past. And we want it so that when April, May, and June rolls around, Donovan is in better physical condition and he's in better mental condition. And he's just in a better place for this organization to take a real run at this thing. And what they decided was, let's try and limit the number of times that we ask him to be the primary point guard. What they decided was, let's limit the amount of times that, he plays back-to-backs or he plays in 3 and 4 game stretches or 3 and 5 game stretches in this case. And it's just a big picture plan to make sure that they don't run Donovan into the ground. They want his minutes to be low. Kenny doesn't have a specific number, but from everything that I've heard, they're trying not to cross 36 as best they can, right? Some matchups are going to dictate it in a different kind of way. Game flow is going to dictate it in a different kind of way. Who's available for the Cavs is also going to play a part of that. But 36 is kind of like the number that they're trying to keep him from passing on a nightly basis, and they've done a really, really good job of it. There have been a bunch of different times where Donovan has been in the low 30s or right at 30, and that's going to benefit him and it's going to benefit the Cavs in the long run. So Yeah, I mean, I do think his knee is something that requires maintenance. Him and his personal trainer, Murphy Grant, they monitor everything pertaining to Donovan and how his body is responding and how his body is reacting and stuff like that. And I think, it was a problem for him last year. And they decided, how can we try and minimize the amount of pressure that he puts on that knee, um, the amount of times that he plays back to backs, the amount of times that he plays multiple games in the stretch of a week or 4 days or 5 days or things like that. It's not something that is problematic to the point where he needs surgery or anything along those lines, but it's just something that the Cavs are cognizant of, and Donovan's cognizant of it. And he just doesn't want to push it too much in the regular season because he sees the opportunity in front of these Cavs. So it's something that the Cavs are going to continue to monitor, but it's not because they're worried about his knee. It's because they have this big picture plan and they just want him to be in the best possible situation from a health standpoint to help this team take a run at a championship.
And I don't think fans should take too much of this into an account. It's not like he's missed a whole bunch of games. He's played 35. He's missed 2 games. He's played in 35 of the Cavs' 37 games. Yes, the Cavs are 33-4 and have won both the games that he's rested. But that's by design. He rested against the Charlotte Hornets and the Toronto Raptors, right? So those are 2 teams that the Cavs feel like they should be able to beat without Donovan Mitchell, and especially after a game where he didn't have his best performance against the OKC Thunder, that might have reiterated that statement a little bit more. And I feel like the other portion of this is like Chris said, this team understands that it is not regular season based. They are not chasing the 73 win record. They're not looking at that. They are. And everybody has said this, not just been Donovan in every single interview he's done. It's been other guys being like, we're just trying to get better. George Niang took to his podcast himself and was like, yeah, we're just trying to get better. And it's not trying to be cliche or anything. It's literally trying to learn from each experience. And Kenny Atkinson and his staff, like Chris mentioned, have had this plan in place since before the season began. So it's not only minute allocation for Donovan, it's not only trying to get him rest on games where they feel comfortable that they can win without him because he is the oldest member of the core 4. He's 28 years old. But Darius, Evan, J.A., they're playing lower minutes than they usually have at this point in the season, especially Evan Mobley talked about it after a game recently, saying this is the freshest or the best he's felt at this part in a season since he's entered the NBA. So it's not like they're just giving up by resting a certain player or anything. Sure, you might say they throw the white flag when the game is out of hand and get the reserves at the bottom of the bottom of the roster in the games. But this isn't Philly with Joel Embiid. Donovan is not missing every single back-to-back. He's playing when the Cavs know that they need him, or he just feels like he wants to get the experience against some of the better competition. The Cavs believe they can win with the roster, not just one player, and they continue to prove that, right? And this is the math that I was trying to do the other day on the podcast with Jimmy as well. They are 33-4. They could go 15-30 over the last 45 games and still match what betting sites predicted before the season for their final record. They are not worried about the prop bets that you guys have had set from the beginning of the year. And obviously you look at the New York Knicks in comparison and what Tom Thibodeau is doing over there and how that could be not helpful for them in the playoffs and the amount of minutes that they played. They got blown out tonight, and still there was one player in their starting lineup that didn't play 30 minutes. So you think about the philosophy of Tom Thibodeau and what he's done over there. It's completely different from Kenny Atkinson trying or almost forcing himself to play 11 guys, not only because that's the style that he wants to play, but he believes that all of them have earned those minutes, right?
The other thing that you look at too, Ethan, is that The timing of these games that Donovan has missed is not a coincidence either. The Cavs are trying to map this out with their schedule as best they possibly can. And one of the games that he missed, it was going into a road game against Boston. Everybody understood that was a significant game for the Cavs. And then the other game that he missed was coming off of the Oklahoma City game, which took a lot out of this team, both from a physical standpoint and from a mental standpoint. Kenny Atkinson said their sports science people track all these different things, physicality, how much energy they're expending. And he said from a physical standpoint, Oklahoma City was the third highest based on their metrics. So coming off of that game and understanding that there's a pretty difficult road trip coming up next week, the Cavs just wanted to find an opportunity, and being able to get, last night off, going into an off day for the Cavs, that just like doubles up on the recovery for Donovan coming off such a physical, emotional, intense, competitive battle against Oklahoma City. And here's the other thing. When you create a buffer, you're a team like the Cavs, you have done so many things well in the first couple of months of this season. You create a buffer here. You're 6.5 games up on the Boston Celtics. You're able to approach these games in a different kind of way because you're not chasing wins. You don't have to chase wins. Yeah, you want the number 1 seed. Yeah, you want home court advantage throughout the entire playoffs. But there's a little bit of a buffer that the Cavs have created so that they feel like they can take advantage of these opportunities and these small breaks in the schedule. And for somebody like Donovan coming off that game against Oklahoma City, getting 2 straight days off essentially is really, really important, especially right in the middle of the season as we're close to the halfway point. So when those opportunities arise for the Cavs as this schedule continues to unfold, you better believe that they're going to try and take advantage of them. Why? Because they can, because they've banked so many wins and they've created distance between themselves and the other teams in the Eastern Conference that they can handle it a different kind of way than a team that, is Miami Heat. Like, it's going to be really, really tough for them to, rest guys, give guys nights off, not play them high minutes and stuff like that, because they're in a different kind of situation where they're trying to avoid the play-in tournament and get into the top 6. The Cavs have such an edge on the other teams in the Eastern Conference that it gives them a little bit of wiggle room, and it gives them some opportunities to kind of play with the schedule a bit. And it's not just Donovan, right? It's probably going to be a little bit of Karras here in the second half of the season, I would expect as well. Maybe some Jared Allen getting some time off, or DNP rest in the second half of the season as well. It's just something that the Cavs believe that big picture, it's going to benefit them greatly. And I think they're going to be right about that.
I agree. And I want to, since we're holding ourselves accountable, I want to correct my math just slightly, because I believe the prop bet for the season was 48.5. So technically they'd have to win 16 games to beat that instead of 15, what I said. So
I think they're going to do that.
Yeah.
I think they're in pretty good shape to top that mark.
Right. Have to win 16 of the next 45 games. Like, come on now.
Yeah.
Anyway, when I was asking our subtexters for their questions, I asked them as well, because I know we love it, to get their hot takes on the season, Chris. And I'm going to channel my old broadcasting days and do this teleprompter read, because this is a little bit of a book from our guy Brandon in South Carolina. But I like what he has to say, and I definitely want to hear what your thoughts are on his take. So here we go.
Mm-hmm.
Brandon says, I'm so glad the world got to see how good the Cavs really are, and that it isn't just a fluke. One issue I have, though, is the media was basically saying this is a prove-it game for the Cavs. Why just us? Because of the last few playoff appearances? Last time I checked, they lost to the Wolves in the play-in, and then last year lost to the Hall of Famer P.J. Washington, JK. Yeah, I'm on the OKC train, but they need to prove that if an offense breaks down their defense, can they win in a shootout? I just think it's unfair they act like they are on another tier than us, but haven't proven anything either in the playoffs. Sorry for the rant.
No, he's right. I was having a conversation with a couple of people inside the organization about that very thing, and it's like it seems as if these people that still have these wonders about the Cavs are just throwing stuff at the wall at this point in time, because there's really nothing. Like, what is the flaw with this team? Like, what is the thing that could prevent them from making a deep run in the playoffs? There was some anonymous coach in a piece on ESPN that said that I don't know how the Cavs are going to fare when they get into the playoffs and the game slows down and they can't get in transition and they have to execute in the half court. Like, bro, they are the number one efficiency in half court offense. Like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, yeah, you can sit there and you can say that the playoffs are different than the regular season, but like, if they were 16th in half court offensive efficiency, cool. Like, your logic makes a little bit more sense. But like, you're talking about the number one team in the NBA in half court offensive efficiency. They have shown that they can execute in the half court. They have shown that they can play a slow down style. This isn't Memphis from a couple of years ago where like so many of their points came in transition or on the fast break, and they were just not the same team when they had to execute in the half court. Like, that was a legitimate concern for that team. Like, you can probably say something similar when those are the stats that you're looking at. But like, that's not the Cavs. They execute in transition. They execute in the half court. They execute early in the shot clock. They execute late in the shot clock. Like, you're just throwing stuff at the wall and you're just making stuff up. Man, I almost swore right there. Like, and it's almost as if they can't bring up the playoff thing anymore, or they understand that they can't bring up the playoff thing anymore, because if they brought up the playoff thing with the Cavs, they'd have to bring that up for Oklahoma City too, because they got just as far as the Cavs did. And so, like, going into that game, like, the conjecture, they were like, oh my God, we can't talk about, the Cavs didn't get out of the second round sort of thing, because then we'd have to talk about that with Oklahoma City too. And we don't want to talk about that with Oklahoma City because we love Oklahoma City. You know what I mean? So yeah, I was talking to a few people in the organization about that, and they thought it was pretty funny that some of the things that are being used against the Cavs in the past are not the same things that people are using against those teams that have run into the same playoff type problems in the past. So I agree with that rant from Brandon. I think that's dead on. Like, if you're going to say that the Cavs, we wonder about them in a playoff environment, you got to say that about Oklahoma City too, because they haven't shown it in the playoffs, not to the level that, you would think for a legitimate title contender at this point.
Yep. I mean, Brandon knows ball, man. Brandon knows ball. So shout out to him for his rant, because I agree. That's like, you have to understand where we talked about the two media markets and the two small market teams, because they don't get treated the same. Like, if you came into yesterday's game, you probably were like, oh yeah, Oklahoma City is a small market team, even though they get a different level of coverage and they have a different personnel or whatever. And it's funny because you talk about how this team is different. Like, this is the same 13 or 14 guys from last year, but is a completely different look, right? And how they're operating, how they're playing. And that is the growth aspect, because a lot of these people that aren't watching the Cavs the same way probably just check the roster and are like, this is the same team from last year. The only difference is Jaylon Tyson. They couldn't be that much different. They can't be doing this at that kind of caliber. Like, and that's the real question, is when, and this is what Darius Garland was saying when Chris asked him point blank, he said, so what is the recognition you aren't getting? It's the TV coverage. And the expectation should be that the Cavs are going to get more games bumped up on national TNT, ESPN, ABC. But like coming in and taking this long to get these games bumped up, they had zero ABC games this season
Mm.
are on the docket and still do to this point. Like, I just think it's definitely notable for people that aren't like tuned into the Cavs every day like we are. It's like this is different. This is why they are a contender. And it's not like, oh, are they still? Like, OKC's game proved it if you weren't already a believer.
The other thing is, I think we, the collective we, always have to provide room for a team to evolve, for a team to learn from their failures, for a team to grow organically. You know what I'm saying? And I think um, just like we look at players and say individually they can improve. Well, like just because a team has been together and has had failures, it doesn't mean that every single postseason that they enter is also going to be a failure. Like there's this assumption out there for some reason that the same result is going to be there for the Cavs this postseason. And it's not based on anything that they have done this year. It's based on what has happened in the past. And it's like at some point, you just have to understand that teams evolve, teams grow, and they can get better without making additions. They can get better without making drastic roster changes. There's just a growth that a team experiences. They have more time together. Like part of the reason why the Cavs, if you want to say quote unquote underachieved last year, their main core four and their projected starting lineup was not together very often. Their core four played 28 regular season games together. Like, you can sit there and you can say, well, that's an excuse and that's the reality of life in the NBA. Yes, that's true. It is the reality of life in the NBA. You do have injuries, you do have adversity that you have to overcome. But you can also admit that when you only have that many games with your four best players together, it's going to affect you. It's going to affect chemistry. It's going to affect continuity. It's going to affect rhythm, timing, like all those different things. It just helped explain why things transpired in some cases the way that they did for the Cavs this year. And like, what is the thing that they're talking? We know where everybody is on the floor. We've all played together for years. Like those kinds of things matter. And it's okay to just like give these teams a little bit of leeway to figure out these things when they get into the playoffs. And instead of assuming that the same result is going to happen, you can look at the way that they're playing and say, why would it be different? How could it be different? And I think the one thing that you can say about this team versus years past is that they're better equipped in a postseason environment because their players are better. This version of Darius Garland that we have seen, it wasn't the one that played against Boston and Orlando last year in the playoffs. Like he's a different guy, and that makes the Cavs a different kind of team. Jared Allen is a different player than he was 2 years ago when he got bullied around by the New York Knicks. Like those things can happen. Like organically, Oklahoma City can become better and they can learn through their failures. That's what happened with Denver. Like Denver didn't make drastic shakeups. They kept their core in place. They added small pieces around the margins, but it was really about like learning through their failures in the postseason. Same thing with Boston. Learn through your failures in the postseason so that you don't duplicate those things. And the Cavs and Evan Mobley and Darius Garland and all their different players are going to be better and more ready for postseason basketball because of what happened last year. But just because of what happened last year, like we don't have to assume that that's going to happen again this year.
Side tangent, just because I can. Um, I mean, everybody talks about how much Kenny Atkinson has impacted this team, and that's true. And it is a glaring change to what the Cavs have needed. Like he was, or he is to this point, seemed as to been the perfect hire for player development, for the offense, for X's
Mm-hmm.
and O's, for in-game adjustments. But you also got to look back at what not only Kobe Altman and Dan Gilbert did when keeping this roster together, keeping this core together, keeping the players around him, but also JB Bickerstaff, like implementing a defense that the Cavs have utilized to this point that has been not only their calling card, but what they can rely on in the fourth quarter to stall teams in games where they're not in a shootout, when they aren't shooting as well as they want to be, right? And then you talk about what JB's doing for the Detroit Pistons this year. I mean, they had 14 wins last year, Chris. They're up to 19. It's January 10th. Like
Yeah.
you have to give respect and it's due, because obviously there's a lot of different times on this podcast we say because this is different than what JU Bickerstaff would have done, right? But in the
Mm-hmm.
same breath, like JB has done and set a standard, and maybe for practices and stuff that they did too much of, like maybe that them doing all of that then is allowing Kenny to pull back a little bit now, because
Mm-hmm.
they have the foundation, they have the fundamentals, they know what needs to happen to win. And that's just
Yeah.
a little rant by me because we're in that kind of mode now. But I want to get into the next question from our subtexters, unless you want to rebuttal,
Nope. All
Chris.
good. Let's move on.
All right, let's do it. So Dave from Tucson comes in with our next question. He says, how is Jaylon Tyson's morale now that he is now buried 12th on the depth chart with everyone healthy? Obviously, with people still coming back and all those different things. But I, Chris, I think he's enjoying winning, like, and
Mm-hmm.
still, as I mentioned last year when the discussion was with Amani Bates and why he was always on the bench, getting back to a decision that J.B. Bickerstaff made of having Amani on the bench with the Cavs to help him learn what it means to be an NBA caliber player. Like, Jalen's doing both. He played in the Cleveland Chargers game today,
Mm-hmm.
and he got to play significant minutes. He's getting reps. He's getting
Mm-hmm.
that portion of what's necessary for his development while also being in the locker room and all those different things with the Cleveland Cavaliers on a daily basis. Being bumped up and down on assignment and being in the locker room has helped him to this point. Obviously, also, we talk about being supported by the guys that are main rotation players. Jared Allen, Karis LeVert, Darius Garland, George Niang, Ty Jerome were all at today's game and giving and wishing him good luck after yesterday's matchup against the Toronto Raptors before the game today. I just think
Mm-hmm.
the morale and the supportiveness allows Jaylon to have the morale of, like, hey, we have your back. We know what it takes. We've all been there. So it doesn't mean that you don't know how to hoop. It's just that's where you're at in your career currently. You're a rookie.
Yeah, he was the 20th pick, and he was drafted by a team that had championship aspirations. He was drafted by a team that is really deep and really talented. The reality is the situation that he's in, doesn't allow for him to get meaningful playing time at the NBA level unless a bunch of things fall a certain way that fall in his favor for him to get that playing time, for him to get those opportunities. So I think he understands. And look, Kenny Atkinson has been honest with him from the very beginning. The Cavs organization, assistant coaches, executives, they've been honest with him from the very beginning. And I think he understands that, I just have to make the most of my opportunity with the NBA team. And that doesn't mean minutes in a game on a Friday night or minutes in a game on a Wednesday night. It means I'm surrounded by NBA coaching. I'm surrounded by NBA player development. I'm going to take advantage of that after shoot around, before practice, after practice. And that's what he's been doing. Like, he's been getting a lot of live reps, 2-on-2, stuff like that against Isaac Okoro, against Craig Porter Jr., against JT Thor. he is capitalizing on this opportunity of being an NBA player behind the scenes so that, when the Cavs do need him, he is prepared, he is ready to step up, and he's ready to produce in that kind of way. But I've had conversations with him a bunch of different times, and Jalen's so eccentric, and Jalen is so loud, and Jalen is so animated that you can tell when he's not himself, right? Like that shows. And he's still that loud guy that he was when he came in as a rookie, right? He's still having conversations with other guys around the locker room. He's going on shopping trips, on road trips with Darius Garland and some of his other teammates. He's going to dinners with these guys, and that's invaluable stuff for a rookie. He's doing the recovery stuff that he needs to do. So he is treating this like it is his job. And that's what he should do. He is being a pro throughout all of this, and he's learning how to be a pro throughout all of this. But his morale is still high, and you can tell just by how he's carrying himself, the way that he's acting, both in practice, after practice, in shoot around, after shoot around, in the locker room after games and stuff like that. You can tell that he's still that lively, animated dude who isn't being bothered by the fact that as a rookie, only in his rookie season, he's not getting playing time, because he understands that his career, he hopes, is going to be a long one. And them drafting him and him being in the NBA wasn't just about 2024, 2025.
And I think there's 2 points to go off of that. Like, I think you got to also understand, like, while basketball is his job and Donovan has multiple times told him to go home because he has either been in the gym too long or has played 2 games in a day because it was with the Cleveland Chargers and got brought back up to the Cleveland Cavaliers. Like, he is a gym rat. He wants to learn. He wants to continue to grow. And as Chris said, he's utilizing having a staff that's different than what he might have had in colleges to a different level, right? Mm-hmm. And the other portion of that is his player development coach, or his guy that he trains with the most, is Damari Carroll. And as I wrote about for cleveland.com, it's Damari is one of the best player comps you could have for Jalen. Someone who didn't come in as a star, who learned how to become a defensive specialist and grow his game in that way. A 3-and-D kind of player that continued to elevate his game when it came to hustle, when it came to physicality, when it came to the intangibles of the game, and then also learning how to elongate his career in the NBA with recovery and things of that nature. Like, having someone in your ear as a rookie, as well as being the only rookie on the team and everybody trying to claim you as their rookie, like, you get a different level of treatment. Sure, you might get some stuff you still got to do in your rookie season, but like, it's different than, oh, we have everybody spread out. No, George Niang wants to be involved in your development. Darius Garland, who we talked about yesterday, who was getting better with his recovery and those things. Like, that's what is going to allow him to get to the next level and continue to grow himself. But I think
that's an important point, because it's whether it's the front office or whether it's the coaches or whether it's his teammates, everybody is still treating him as if he is a critical member of this basketball team. Just because he's not getting playing time, just because every now and then he joins the G League charge to get meaningful opportunities and meaningful reps, it doesn't mean that the Cavs as an organization are treating him any differently. They're giving him the same opportunities. They're allowing him to have the same kinds of resources that everybody on this roster has. And it's the same thing for Luke Travers. It's the same thing for JT Thor. There are times where, like, many of the assistant coaches for this team will stay back on the road following shoot around and be on the court with these guys until maybe 1 or 1:30, because whatever it is that they want, whatever it is that they need, the coaches respect that, and they say, all right, if you're going to put in that work, we're going to put in that work right alongside you. And if that means a later lunch, if that means a shorter pregame nap or whatever the case may be, they're right there beside him, doing everything that they can do to help him become the best player that he can be, with the understanding that he's just not going to get consistent playing time on this basketball. He didn't join the Detroit Pistons. He didn't join the Washington Wizards. He didn't join the Charlotte Hornets. He joined the number one team in the entire NBA. And there's just not a place for a rookie in this rotation right now. But they're still giving him everything that he needs to be the best basketball player and be the best person and be the best professional that he can be. And I think he appreciates that.
Yeah, being the best person he could be. Like, Jaylon Tyson, I think also you have to remember, like, he was the 20th overall pick in the draft. This is a dream. You have the chance to go to the Eastern Conference Finals, potentially, in your first season in the league. Yeah. Right? Like, you got more money in your pocket that you might have not expected, right? You get to experience the NBA. You get to say you are living a dream of yours since you are a kid. Like, that's the other thing that we have to remember. Like, one, this is a game. Two, these are people. Like, aspirations, dreams, egos, all of those things are reality. But, like, if you get to say, hey, I'm learning from Donovan Mitchell on a daily basis. Hey, I'm learning from Karis LeVert on a daily basis. 30 years old Karis LeVert, who is coming into his own and probably having one of the best seasons of his career, right? So you talk about all of those different things, and it just takes it to a different level when you talk about how he is learning and while also having joy. Chris mentioned it. He's loud. He's boisterous. He's allowing himself to be, one, made fun of, but also not afraid to jab back in the locker room as well. Right. But here's the last question of this podcast when it comes to the Hey Chris episode. And I know Chris is going to enjoy this one. Dave from PA says, I haven't been home to Cleveland for a while. I'd love to come home for a game and hang out. What are the best places to eat around the Rock?
Oh, man. So this is hard, right? Because I'm not usually somebody who goes downtown Cleveland to eat. I'll go to Crocker Park. I'll stay here in Bay Village to one of the few restaurants that they actually have here. I'll go to, Sperry Road and some of those restaurants there. So I don't know that I'm the best one to ask about this because I don't frequent downtown. Not as much as you do, Ethan. But I'll say, like, Il Rione is awesome. I'll say that Barrio is awesome. There are fancy steakhouses downtown if you can afford them. Red is fantastic. I love Red. I celebrate, big occasions there because it's not like something that I'm going to have every single night. Marble Room, if you can get a reservation, is fantastic. And if you're willing to pay that kind of money for just a special night out with somebody, that one's great. I'm trying to think of some of these other ones. I like Mabel's. Mabel's barbecue. It's a different kind of barbecue, but I like it. You know me. I love my barbecue.
No, I know, but I know you say that, but like I just remember a different conversation we had on this podcast, and people were trying to determine my feeling about Mabel's. So we're just gonna move past that.
So you probably have like a better feel for the downtown spots.
I don't be going out that much, Chris. I be in the crib. If I'm eating, I'm probably like I'm an Uber Eats guy. I'm a DoorDash guy.
What's wrong with you?
Hey man, it'd be cold in the wintertime. I'd be in bed. I'd be writing my stories. We don't go out too much over here. But
you are just out of college, covering the best team in the NBA,
right?
Living in downtown Cleveland,
yep.
And you're just not taking advantage of everything that this job gives you, and everything that this lifestyle gives you, and everything that this city gives you. What are you doing?
I mean, I'll hang out around the flats sometimes, but like I'll go to
out one of those spots. You want to go to Shooters? Shooters down in the flats. There you go.
Hey,
good spot.
I like the place that I've been to lately, and shout out to Danny Cunningham. He put me onto this spot. Blue Point was a good steakhouse. I really liked them.
No doubt.
I liked the seafood risotto at Cleveland Chop. That was good.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Ironically, those are right next to each other. But
Yeah, there you go.
I think like I don't.
I think
It depends.
Lago on the East Bank, they have really good meatballs.
Yeah, you
I'm
did
into
talk about those.
Lago. Yeah.
I think it's definitely like a depending on what you want to eat and what kind of vibe you want. Because
Right.
like if you are trying to go to a bar that has good food, like I think High Five it's called, has good food and has a
Uh-huh.
good view of the water and stuff. You could also go. What's the Alley Cat was good.
Alley Cat. It's
Alley
an
Cat was
oyster
good.
bar, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I'm a big seafood guy. You know, Baltimore raised. You know how we do it. But
There's a
yeah,
spot in the theater district if you want some Italian. It's called Ciabreo.
mm,
I did that before one of the shows that I saw at Playhouse Square at the theater, where they call it now Key Bank Theater. I think that's what it's called these
yeah.
days. Everything's sponsored nowadays. You got to throw that sponsor in there. Yeah, we had Ciabreo one time before we went to go see a show. So that's a good spot. There's a lot of places around downtown. You're right. It all just kind of depends. Like, what kind of food are you looking for? What vibe are you looking for? How much are you willing to pay? Are you willing to make a reservation in advance, or is this more like a spur of the moment type thing? All of those things really matter. I will tell you that when writers come in from wherever it is, Boston, Oklahoma City, New York, a lot of them frequent Barrio. Barrio is one of the go-to spots, just
That's
because
the
it's open
taco
late.
spot, right?
It's the taco spot. It's
Yeah,
a
yeah, yeah.
different kind of taco spot. It's a different vibe in there. It's open late. It's affordable. All those different things.
Yeah, and I've been to Barrio, so I think I probably shortchanged myself a little bit. I have
There you go.
decent experience, but like
You
I feel
go.
like I don't like. I'm more of like if I could order in and then still get the experience or whatever. I
You
also
don't
live.
get the experience when you order in. You dope.
I'm talking about watching the sport games because I don't cheer for the same teams y'all do. Anyway,
Food doesn't taste the same. It loses integrity.
it also does. It doesn't help that I live right across from like 3 different restaurants. So if I want something
So you
and I
just like
know,
go to those
yeah,
three.
and I know I like what I like over there, so it doesn't mean anything. But
Mm,
I will say this: my favorite hangover food in the city, cilantro taqueria. So that's what I be on. You know what I'm saying? So just in case. You said you want to come down and have some fun in Cleveland in the city. So in case you have a little too much fun, that's what I would suggest as your after day food.
that's hilarious. Shake off that hangover with some tacos.
Yeah, yeah,
There
yeah.
you go. What's that new steakhouse? I don't know how
Mm.
new it is, but there are billboards up for it all the time now. Shoot. It's in Shaker.
Ooh, Shaker
Um,
Heights.
yeah, it's in Shaker Square. But like it's one of the top places. Well, they have all these different voting things nowadays, and it's one of the top places. Edwin's, that's what it's called. It's called Edwin's.
Yeah, I just found the articles. It says they're like moving somewhere. Edwin's restaurant leaving Shaker Square to move into Nighttown something
Yep,
in Cleveland. So
yep,
there
yep,
you
yep,
go.
yep.
There's your plug location for where they're gonna be at. I don't know if it'll be here by the time you get here officially moved, but we'll have to wait and see. Let us know what you think since you're on the subtext, Mr. Dave from PA. Send us in what you're thinking. But yeah, that's
The other place is if you want very Cleveland flavor food, Sokolowski's University Inn. I mean, that's corned beef, so that's very specific to Cleveland, I would say. Um, but that would be someplace that if you want something that has more of a Cleveland feel to it, is that closed? Hold on.
Oh no! Don't be giving out wrong information on the
Hold
pod,
on.
Chris. Oh man!
What? Oh,
So
no.
this is a live reaction, folks. This is not
This is a live reaction. Temporarily closed Cleveland's oldest family-owned restaurants. Oh
man.
my gosh, hold on. Out of an abundance of caution, thinking of our staff, family, and customers, we have made the difficult decision to close during this time. The amount of support we've received has been truly overwhelming. For 97 years, we've been feeding the people of Cleveland. See, this goes back to what I said at the very beginning of this question. Like, I'm not the East Side guy. I live on the West Side, and I frequent these places on the West Side more so than the East Side. So that just tells you how up to date I am on the restaurant scene on the East Side. I just gave out a place that is temporarily closed. When did that happen?
Man, must be recent. But to Chris's point about my lack of exploration when it comes to eating habits,
Gosh.
I've been going out with some of the other beat writers on the beat after practices, shoot arounds, or whatever.
Yeah.
Plus, like people around the league that come in and like have to explore that way. So I'm expanding my horizon. But Chris, we were throwing around the idea because I know we talk about this on the podcast all the time, like a food podcast with the podcast name being Eaten on the Beat. What do you think? I think that's pretty catchy. I think that might catch on.
That's not bad. I don't
Yeah.
mind that. Oh my God. I am so behind the times. The restaurant shut its door due to COVID and just never opened back up?
So this is like years ago.
Yeah.
So Chris be giving y'all recommendations on places he hasn't gone in 3 years.
Well, I mean,
there's a
it's
different
back when I
chef
used
back
to
there.
frequent downtown a little bit more, when I used to work out of a radio station downtown.
Yeah.
Oh my
Well,
gosh. That's what's sad about this, Ethan. I can give better recommendations for Manhattan than I can for downtown Cleveland because I stay on the west side so much.
that's crazy. That's
I know.
crazy. But all right, West Side, East Side battle, Western Conference, Eastern Conference battle. That'll happen again in 5 days. If y'all are looking forward to that, we sent out a text to our subtexters about the ratings of the OKC Cleveland Cavaliers game. Yes, Chris, I know you love that transition. I just did somehow to get it
In
back
my
to basketball.
defense, I gave like 15 recommendations.
Yep.
I think 14 of them were still open. So pat on the back for me on that one. I think only one of them was closed, hopefully.
Still open, but maybe there's a different chef or whatever because it's been a couple years.
That's right.
Anyway, but just to wrap this up, back on basketball notes.
Okay, if we must.
I think we should.
Okay.
Looking at the East Coast West Coast battle between the OKC Thunder and the Cleveland Cavaliers, still the 2 top teams in the Eastern and Western Conference. It's already being dubbed the rematch, Chris, by NBA and ESPN and on TNT and all those other things. Like, they're like the game between the Thunder and the Cavs this past week had 1.87 million viewers averaged and got up to, I think it's 2.5 million, which is like the average was up more than 20% than comparable window last year. And it also, for all of us that are like me, then get your news on social media and all those other things, like on X, formerly Twitter, the Cavs were the #1 trending topic worldwide during the game. So I just think it comes to show that if, going back to the cliche, if you build it, they will come. And
That's right.
The Cleveland Cavaliers are building their case not only to be a contender, but to make their way all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals and to the NBA Finals as well. But
that's what we talked about on the podcast the other night, right? Bleep market, bleep drama, bleep trade rumors, bleep all the things that you feel like move the needle. You just put 2 great teams out there and have them play a competitive, great basketball game, memorable basketball game, and that's going to win. And that's going to resonate with people. So I'm glad. Like, this should be a window into thinking moving forward for TV executives. If there's any concern about, oh my gosh, the NBA Finals could be Cleveland and Oklahoma City and not New York. Like, this tells you, if it's a great product, that sells. If it's a great product, that wins. It doesn't have to be about market size. It doesn't have to be about only LeBron James. It doesn't have to be about historically great teams that have this aura around them for years. It just has to be great basketball. And the other night was one of the best regular season games that I've ever seen. It's one of the best regular season games that a lot of people have seen in a while. And when you have that, people are going to tune in. People are going to pay attention.
And with that being said, that'll wrap up today's episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast and another episode of Hey Chris. But remember to become a Cavs Insider and interact with Chris, me, and Jimmy by subscribing to Subtext. If you want to get a little shout out on the pod next week, you want to send in your hot takes and get praise from us a little bit about your basketball knowledge, subscribe. Send in your questions, send in your name, your city or state, and we'll get to you as well. So, to do so, sign up for a 14-day free trial or visit cleveland.com/Cavs and click on the blue bar at the top of the page. If you don't like it, that's fine. All you have to do is text the word STOP. It's easy. We can tell you that the people who signed up stick around because this is the best way to get insider coverage on the Cavs from me, Chris, and Jimmy. This isn't just our podcast. It's your podcast, and the only way to have your voice heard is through Subtext. Y'all be safe. We out.